Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Bookish Dives.
It is so great to be back here.
You know, I actually wasn't entirely sure we were going to keep this specific format going. We've done a couple of these discussions before and just kind of dipping our toes into some heavier nonfiction.
Yeah, testing the waters a bit.
Right, testing the waters. But the messages we've gotten from you guys have just been overwhelming. Apparently, you all really like this sort of Cliff's Notes, but with personality approach to things.
It turns out people actually want the deep insights without having to lug around a massive 400-page hardcover in their bag all day. Who knew, right?
Exactly. So we are back by popular demand. And today we are tackling an absolute monster of a book.
Oh, yeah, we are.
We are getting into The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion by Jonathan Haidt.
This is honestly one of those rare books that kind of acts like a pair of X-ray glasses.
Oh.
Once you put them on, you literally can't take them off. You will never look at a news headline or a chaotic Twitter thread or, your crazy uncle at Thanksgiving in the exact same way ever again.
I mean, I definitely need those glasses.
Yeah.
Because, frankly, does it not feel like half the country has just completely lost its mind lately?
It really does.
And I don't even mean that as a joke. I mean, depending on who you vote for or what news you watch, it honestly feels like the other side is living in a completely separate reality.
Yeah, it feels like you're just shouting across this massive canyon at each other.
Right, and it is so exhausting for you, the listener, for everyone. You try to engage, right? You bring facts to the table. You bring charts. You bring this impeccable bulletproof logic.
Oh, we all love our charts.
And the other person just stares blankly at you, doubles down on their opinion, and basically calls you evil. It makes you just want to bang your head against the wall.
Well, that exact frustration you're talking about is exactly why Jonathan Haidt wrote this book in the first place.
Right.
Yeah. So just a quick credential check on him. He's a moral psychologist. He was at UVA for a long time. Now he's at NYU. And he has spent his entire career studying how morality works across different cultures.
Okay, so he's the guy to ask how to win these arguments then.
Well, here is the kicker. His goal with this book isn't actually to teach you how to win those political arguments.
Oh, which is extremely disappointing because I really want to win.
I know you do. We all do. But his mission here is fundamentally different. He wants to pull us away from all that anger and move us toward a sense of awe, wonder, and curiosity regarding human nature.
Awe and wonder instead of, just being right.
Exactly. The goal isn't to declare who is objectively right. It's to understand why we are all so completely convinced that we are right. He wants to cure us of what he calls the rationalist delusion.
Rationalist delusion. That honestly sounds like a prog rock album from the 70s or something.
It really does, yeah. But it is actually the root cause of that exact frustration you were just describing.
Okay, lay it on me.
So the rationalist delusion is this deeply ingrained but totally false idea that reason is the supreme ruler of our passions.
Like we're all just very logical beings.
Right. We love to think of ourselves as these objective data processing machines that only occasionally get tripped up by emotions. But Haidt says that is scientifically backwards.
Backwards how?
We are highly emotional creatures who use logic very rarely. And when we do use logic, we usually only use it to justify what our emotions have already decided we're going to do.
Wait, hold on a second. Are you basically saying I am not consciously in charge of my own opinions?
Yeah.
That I'm just, reacting to things?
Well, let's unpack the central metaphor of part one of the book, and then you can tell me. Haidt describes the divided human mind as a tiny rider sitting up on top of a massive elephant.
Okay, I am visualizing it.
Yeah.
And I'm the writer in this scenario, obviously.
Yes. The rider represents your conscious reasoning. It's the little voice inside your head. It's the part of you that uses language, does math, plans for the future, and constructs all those logical arguments.
So it's the me that I actually identify as me.
Exactly. It is the conscious 1%.
And the elephant is the other 99%, I assume.
You got it. The elephant represents all of your automatic mental processes, your gut feelings, your snap judgments, your emotional fight or flight responses, and critically for this discussion, your moral intuitions.
Okay, so the elephant is huge, it's powerful, and it just kind of moves on its own accord.
Right. And the standard view, that rationalist view we just talked about, assumes that the rider is holding the reins, firmly steering the elephant wherever it needs to go.
Like I see a fact, I process it, and I steer my elephant in the correct logical direction.
That's how we think it works. But Haidt points out that if you look at our evolutionary history, that's completely wrong. The elephant evolved first. For millions of years, early humans navigated the entire world entirely on instinct, emotion, and intuition.
So the writer came to the party way later.
Much later. Conscious reasoning is a relatively new evolutionary feature. And here's the twist. It didn't evolve to be the boss. It evolved to serve the elephant.
To serve it? How so?
Well, there's a famous quote from the philosopher David Hume that Haidt uses here. Hume said, "Reason is and ought only to be the slave of the passions."
Wow. The slave of the passions. That is a strong way to phrase it.
It is. But think about it from an evolutionary standpoint. In a complex social group, you need to be able to explain your actions to other people to maintain your reputation and your status.
Right, you can't just run around doing random things without a good excuse.
Exactly. So the writer conscious reasoning basically evolved to be a press secretary or an inner lawyer.
Oh man, a press secretary, like at the White House.
Spot on. Think about what a White House press secretary actually does. Do they sit in the Situation Room and make the actual decisions on foreign policy?
No, absolutely not. They're just the messenger.
Right. The real decisions are made behind closed doors by the people in power. That is your elephant acting instantly on instinct and gut feeling.
And then the press secretary walks out to the podium after the fact.
Yes. They walk out after the decision is already locked in, and their entire job is to spin a story that makes that decision sound incredibly logical, highly defensible, and really smart to the public.
That is actually incredibly depressing to think about.
It's definitely a massive blow to the human ego, for sure.
But it makes so much sense when you put it like that. I mean, think about when you buy something you definitely know you can't afford. Like, let's say, a ridiculously expensive sports car.
Oh, perfect example. Your elephant saw the shiny red paint, smelled the leather seats, and just instantly went, "I want that." That was a completely visceral, emotional reaction.
And I just buy the car because the elephant is in charge.
You buy the car, and then you go home, and your partner asks you why on earth you just drained the savings account.
And immediately my writer wakes up, goes to the podium, and says, "Well, actually, honey, it has a fantastic resale value, and the safety ratings are top tier, and honestly, I need it for networking."
Exactly. You are quite literally manufacturing logic after the fact to defend a purely emotional decision your elephant already made. That is post hoc justification. That is the press secretary at work.
Wow.
And Haidt's core argument is that we do the exact same thing with our politics and our morality.
Okay, this is the aha moment for me.
Yeah.
This completely explains why throwing facts at someone in an argument just doesn't work.
Precisely. When you get into a heated political debate with someone, you are usually just talking to their writer.
I'm throwing my charts and graphs at their press secretary.
Yes. But the press secretary doesn't actually have the power to change the policy.
Yeah.
Only the elephant has that power. And if you haven't spoken to their elephant, if you haven't done something to shift their underlying intuitive gut feeling, the writer will just stand at that podium and counter-argue with you forever.
It's basically like trying to steer a runaway train by logically debating the conductor who was locked in the bathroom.
That is a very vivid image, but honestly, yes. And Haidt actually backs this up scientifically with some fascinating but very uncomfortable research on a phenomenon he calls moral dumbfounding.
Oh, I remember this from the notes. It is so uncomfortable.
It is entirely designed to be uncomfortable. In his research, he presents people with these highly taboo scenarios that are technically completely harmless, but they feel deeply instinctively wrong. The classic example in the book is the brother and sister scenario.
Okay, brace yourselves, everyone. Lay it on us.
So he asks subjects to imagine a brother and sister. They're both fully consenting adults, and they decide they want to sleep together. Just once.
Oh.
No, wait, here are the parameters he gives the subjects. They use 2 separate forms of reliable birth control, so there is zero chance of a pregnancy or genetic defects. They do it entirely in private. Nobody ever finds out, so there's no social shame or harm to their family. And afterwards, they actually feel closer to each other, and it doesn't ruin their relationship.
Okay.
Then Haidt asks the subjects, was it morally wrong for them to do that?
Even just hearing you describe the parameters, my skin is physically crawling. Like, my immediate overwhelming reaction, yes, absolutely, that is horrifically wrong.
Right, and that revulsion you are feeling right now, that is your elephant rearing up. It's an instant flash of pure disgust. The judgment happens in a millisecond. But now, as the writer, I want you to tell me why it's wrong based on the parameters I just gave you.
Well, I mean, because of the risk of inbreeding. You know, genetic defects of the kids.
But I told you they use double birth control. There is zero possibility of a baby.
Okay, fine. but it's going to completely mess up their psychological dynamic. It's emotional harm.
The scenario explicitly states that they felt closer afterwards and the relationship was perfectly fine. No emotional harm occurred.
Well, it's just wrong. It's just a wrong thing to do.
And there it is. That right there is moral dumbfounding. You have this incredibly strong moral verdict of guilty, but your inner lawyer has completely run out of logical evidence to back it up.
That is wild. Because a pure rationalist would have to say, well, if there's no harm and it's fair, then there's no foul.
Exactly. But almost nobody actually feels that way. You feel the wrongness first, intensely, and then you scramble to find reasons second.
So essentially, we are all just walking around every day being completely led by these giant emotional elephants, while our writers are frantically typing up press releases trying to convince the world we are logical beings.
That is the reality of the human condition, according to Haidt. Intuitions come first, strategic reasoning comes second. So if you ever want to persuade anyone of anything, you have to stop talking to the writer. You have to appeal directly to the elephant and change the intuition first.
Which naturally leads us to the next massive question. What exactly does the human elephant care about? If morality is intuitive, what are those intuitions actually made of?
This brings us to part 2 of the book, which introduces moral foundations theory. This is the real toolkit for understanding why liberals and conservatives constantly talk past each other. He uses this great analogy of taste buds.
Taste buds. Okay, but before we get into the specific flavors, we have to talk about how weird we are.
Right. Yes, we do. And we mean WEIRD as an acronym. WEIRD. It stands for Western, Educated, Industrialized, Rich, and Democratic.
Which I think is probably a fairly accurate description of most of the people listening to this right now.
Statistically speaking, yes. And Haidt's point is that weird people are actually the massive outliers when you look at all of human history. We are the weirdos.
Because we view morality differently than everyone else.
Right. In almost every other culture throughout history, morality was a very broad concept. It was about protecting the community, honoring the group, respecting the sacred. But in modern weird cultures, we have slowly stripped morality down to really just 2 main things.
Harm and fairness.
Exactly. Yeah. If you were to stop a secular Western liberal on the street and ask them, hey, what makes an action immoral? They will almost certainly answer with some version of, well, did it hurt somebody? Or was it unfair to someone?
Which honestly sounds like a pretty complete moral system to my weird brain. Be kind, don't hurt people, don't cheat. What else do you even need?
Well, Haidt argues that the human moral palate is actually like a tongue, and it naturally has 6 distinct moral taste receptors. But weird people have basically just lost the taste for 4 of them. We only eat off a 2-item menu.
Okay, let's look at the full menu then. We got the first 2, care harm, which is about being kind and protecting the vulnerable.
Right.
And we've got fairness cheating, which is about justice, equal rights, proportionality. So what are the other taste buds that we are supposedly missing?
The third foundation is loyalty betrayal. This is all about patriotism, standing with your group, being a team player. It's that deep tribal feeling that betraying your family or your country is a profound moral crime, even if that betrayal doesn't actually physically harm anybody.
Okay, I can recognize that feeling. What's next?
The fourth is authority subversion. Now, this isn't just about raw power or oppression. It's about a deep respect for tradition, for parents, for legitimate hierarchy, and for the social order. It's the intuition that chaos is inherently bad and structural order is inherently good.
I can definitely see how modern individualists might chafe against that one a bit.
Oh, absolutely. Then we get to the fifth foundation, sanctity degradation. This is the core idea that the body is a temple. It's the feeling that certain things are elevated, pure, and holy, while other things are polluted, degraded, or disgusting.
And it's not just about avoiding germs, right?
No, it's way deeper than hygiene. It's about spiritual purity and the sacredness of life.
And there was a 6th one mentioned too, right?
Liberty.
Yes,
Yeah.
liberty oppression, which is the drive to resist bullies and tyrants.
Yeah.
But the text primarily emphasizes the split around the first 5 core ones when discussing the main cultural divide. And to really understand how powerful that sanctity foundation is, we have to talk about the cannibal example.
Oh boy. The ultimate stress test for weird morality. It really is. So, Haidt brings up this horrifying, but entirely real case from Germany. A man named Armin Mewes put out an advertisement online, literally looking for someone who is willing to be killed and eaten.
Which sounds completely absurd, like a horror movie plot.
But someone actually answered the ad, a man named Bernd Brandes.
And the most crucial, mind-bending part of this whole story is that it was a completely consensual arrangement. Brandis actively wanted to do this. They met up, they agreed on all the terms, they even filmed it to prove consent.
Right. So let's run this through the weird moral matrix. If your entire definition of morality is solely based on care, did anyone get hurt against their will? And fairness, did both parties agree to the terms? You hit a massive philosophical wall here.
Because technically speaking, under those strict definitions, this was just a consensual, fair transaction between two willing adults.
Exactly. But what is your elephant doing right now as we talk about this?
My elephant is screaming at the top of its lungs that this is a horrific, evil abomination.
Yes, that intense revulsion, that deep disgust you're experiencing, that is the sanctity foundation firing off in your brain. It is telling your writer that a human being possesses a certain divinity or intrinsic dignity that absolutely shouldn't be degraded and treated like a piece of meat, entirely regardless of whether there was consent or not.
Okay, that makes it very clear. So we all have these extra taste buds in our evolutionary wiring: loyalty, authority, sanctity.
Yeah.
And Haidt says that how much we rely on these different buds is basically what drives the entire culture war between liberals and conservatives.
That is the big payoff of this theory, yes. Haidt's extensive data shows that liberals generally construct their moral matrix using primarily just a three-foundation mix. They dial up care, fairness, and liberty to the absolute maximum, but they have a very, very low tolerance for arguments based on loyalty, authority, and sanctity.
Actually, it seems like a lot of times liberals don't just ignore those three, they actively view them as bad things.
You're exactly right. To a very progressive liberal, relying on authority often just looks like systemic oppression. Demanding loyalty looks like dangerous tribalism or racism. And appealing to sanctity just sounds like outdated religious dogma trying to control people's bodies. They are often deeply hostile to those foundations.
Okay, and what about conservatives?
Well, the data shows that conservatives actually rely on all six foundations roughly equally. They definitely value care and fairness, but they also place a very high, deep value on loyalty, authority, and sanctity.
Haidt refers to this in the book as the conservative advantage.
It does?
Now, I want to pause here and just be crystal clear for everyone listening. When we say advantage, we're absolutely not saying, and Haidt is not saying, that conservatives are morally better or more correct. We were just impartially reporting the science here.
Thank you. Yes, that is a vital distinction. It is not a moral judgment at all. It is purely a strategic and communicative observation. Think of human morality like playing a piano. Conservatives are playing a moral song using all the keys on the keyboard. Liberals are playing a very complex, beautiful song, but they're only using half the keys.
Oh, that's a great way to visualize it. So when a conservative politician gets up and gives a passionate speech about protecting the sanctity of marriage or disrespecting the flag, a liberal listener literally doesn't possess the active moral receptors to process that frequency.
Exactly. To the liberal, it just sounds like meaningless noise. They think, that isn't a valid moral argument about harm or fairness. You are just being a bigot.
And the exact reverse happens too.
Oh, constantly. Conservatives look at liberals and they think, okay, you care deeply about victims and fairness, sure, but you have zero respect for the institutions, the traditions, and the foundational order that actually hold our society together. You are actively trying to saw off the branch that we are all sitting on.
It just creates this massive, impenetrable blind spot between the two sides. They are, quite literally speaking, different moral languages.
They are operating in entirely different moral matrices. Liberals are incredibly gifted experts at detecting victims and solving novel social problems. Conservatives are incredibly gifted experts at preserving the group and maintaining social capital. And the truth is, a healthy, functioning society desperately needs both of those skill sets.
But instead of treating it like a symbiotic partnership, we treat it like a blood sport. Which actually brings us to the final major piece of the puzzle here in part 3.
Right, the question of why we are so incredibly tribal.
Exactly. Why does modern politics feel less like a debate and more like a fundamentalist religion?
Because, from the perspective of our evolutionary brain wiring, it effectively is a religion. Haidt introduces this concept he calls homo duplex.
Meaning two-level man.
Right. He argues that human nature operates on two distinct levels. Level 1 is that we are about 90% chimp, meaning we are fundamentally selfish, individualistic, and competitive. We are constantly trying to get the best bananas for ourselves and climb the social hierarchy.
I mean, I definitely identify with the chimp a lot of the time.
We all do. It's our default state. But then there is level 2. We are also about 10% B, Meaning, humans possess this incredibly unique evolutionary ability to temporarily flip a switch in our brains. So Haidt literally calls it the hive switch, where we completely lose our sense of individual self and merge seamlessly into a massive superorganism.
We see this exact phenomenon in everyday life, don't we? Like at a massive sporting event. When you were standing in a stadium surrounded by 50,000 people all wearing the same colors and screaming in unison for the same team, you don't feel like you anymore. You just feel like part of us.
That is the perfect example. The hive switch is flipped. You also see it in the military, in synchronized dancing, and most crucially for human history, you see it in religion.
Now, this is where Haidt really pushes back against the new atheist movement, right? People like Richard Dawkins.
Yes, very strongly. The new atheists often argue that religion is basically a cognitive virus, a harmful parasite that tricks the rational brain into believing nonsense.
But Haidt disagrees with that.
Completely. Haidt argues that from an evolutionary biology perspective, religion is actually a brilliant adaptation. It was the crucial social technology that allowed early humans to trigger that hive switch. It allowed us to bind together into massive, highly cooperative groups without needing to be directly related by blood. It made our groups infinitely stronger and more cohesive than groups without it.
There is a quote from the book that sums this up perfectly. Morality binds and blinds.
Yes, it binds us tightly together into cooperative teams, but in doing so, it completely blinds us to the objective truth and to the humanity of the other teams.
And as traditional religious affiliation declines in many weird cultures, people haven't lost the biological need to flip the hive switch.
Okay.
So politics has essentially replaced religion as the primary tribal community.
Exactly. The political parties are no longer just debating clubs focused on tax policy. They are fully functioning tribal moral communities.
But how do we actually pick which church we join? If it's not logic, what drives someone to become a staunch liberal or a staunch conservative?
Right. Haidt uses a really fascinating analogy involving twins to explain this. He calls it the first draft concept of the human mind.
Right, the genetic first draft. Break that down for us.
So imagine a set of fraternal twins. Genetics provides a biological first draft of our brains. Now, it doesn't write the final book. Your life experience, your trauma, your environment does that. But genetics definitely sets the genre.
Okay.
So one twin might be born with a brain amygdala that is biologically highly sensitive to threats, easily startled by loud noises, and highly prone to feelings of disgust.
And that biological wiring predisposes them toward what?
That biological first draft strongly predisposes them to find conservative narratives much more appealing. Narratives that value order, strict boundaries, safety, and tradition.
Okay, and the other twin?
The other twin might be born with a brain that has very low threat sensitivity, but a very high baseline for what psychologists call openness to experience. They naturally crave novelty, variety, and change.
And that biological setup predisposes them to resonate with liberalism.
Precisely. They are absolutely not born with a Democrat or Republican voter registration card. But their physical brains are wired to find certain moral arguments much more comforting and appealing. And once they start leaning toward a side, they join a team.
And once they join the team, the hive switch flips.
The switch flips, and they immediately begin circling the wagons around their group's sacred values.
And those sacred values are different for each side.
Very different. For liberals, the ultimate sacred values might revolve around protecting marginalized groups, anti-racism, or total equality. For conservatives, the sacred values might be the American flag, the unborn fetus, or traditional family structures.
And here is the truly scary part about all this. Once a concept becomes sacred to your tribe, the human brain essentially shuts down its critical thinking capabilities regarding that topic.
It does. We go completely blind.
We literally lose the cognitive ability to process empirical facts that contradict or threaten our sacred values. We don't view an attack on our policy as a simple disagreement. We view it as literal blasphemy, and you cannot compromise with blasphemy.
That is exactly why our political discourse feels so toxic right now.
It is terrifying, honestly. But having read this and talked through it, I have to admit it also makes me feel, I don't know, slightly less angry at everybody.
How so? That's an interesting reaction.
Well, if I realize that the guy I'm furiously arguing with in a Facebook comment section isn't just inherently stupid or objectively evil, but that his elephant is merely protecting his deeply held sacred values, and then I realize that my elephant is doing the exact same thing on the other side, as it kind of humanizes the whole messy situation.
That is exactly the goal of the righteous mind. Haidt concludes the book by pointing out that we are all, by evolutionary design, self-righteous hypocrites. Every single one of us. We are biologically wired to brilliantly spot the tiny speck in our neighbor's eye while completely ignoring the massive log in our own.
So what is the actual fix here? Do we just throw our hands up and give up on ever agreeing?
No, we don't give up. But we do have to radically change our strategy. If you want to improve our politics, or honestly, if you just want to survive your next Thanksgiving dinner without a screaming match, you have to drop the pervasive sense of moral superiority.
We have to understand that the other person isn't crazy. They're just relying on a different set of moral taste buds.
Exactly. You have to learn how to speak directly to their elephant rather than arguing with their press secretary. And perhaps most importantly, we all have to cultivate enough intellectual humility to suspect that our own internal writer might just be spinning a convenient story that we desperately want to believe.
Man, that is a lot of heavy stuff to process.
Yeah.
But it is exactly the kind of cognitive toolkit we really need as a society right now.
I couldn't agree more.
Well, we are going to have to wrap up our discussion right there. Listeners, if this bookish dive sparked some awe and wonder for you today, or honestly, even if it just made you rethink the last angry political comment you posted online, please do us a huge favor and hit that follow button.
Yes, please do. It really helps us keep these bookish dives going for you guys.
We've got some fantastic topics coming down the pipeline. We're covering history, futurism, psychology. You really don't want to miss them.
And I will just leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over today. We spend a lot of time talking about the writer and the elephant. If conscious reasoning is really just a press secretary hired to defend your emotional intuitions, how many of your own supposedly logical political arguments are actually just you desperately rationalizing a gut reaction that you don't even fully understand yourself?
Wow. I'm definitely going to be staring at the ceiling thinking about that all night. Thank you so much for joining us, everyone.
See you next time.